have to turn around for a second.
Yeah! Hey, I'm You're gonna do this interview, big guy? Come on, let's do this interview now! I know you'll be talking to guys like me, let's go! Get back to me for that 5 years of that picture, Harrison! You're the media! What am I talking to the media?
I always remember when he worked for me years ago, he had a back problem. Well, that'll work.
In the bar, you know, the changes in musical styles throughout the years.
Yeah. Life and Musical Times of, Earl Wilson. No, Earl, I can't remember.
Well, you better, because I'm going to ask you.
Okay,
We going?
going. Stand by, I'm gonna start on you.
Let me get my wind back.
No, we should be talking.
You think? Oh, okay, here. For those of you who are old enough to remember, Doug and the Slugs have been around for 20-odd years or so. Now, unlike a lot of the bands that reform and come back and reform and come back, the Slugs have never actually gone away. And for all you young people that are watching this show, something you should know about the Slugs is that they were actually one of the first independent bands in Canada. Did everything on their own to begin with.
Yeah.
And Doug's here, and he's going to tell us what it's like to be an independent guy in this crazy little music industry.
Well, it means you're poor.
Poor but happy?
Okay, poor and unhappy.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Poor but happy, no. But how did the band start, actually, in terms of getting your deal?
It just comes down to like, and I try to explain this to a lot of bands today, you know, when we used to work, we go through this whole thing too, where, 20 years ago when you started out, there was no way other to get your music out there than to actually tour, And
Which you're still
we
doing.
just toured, we toured and toured and toured, and then after about 2 years, we tried to get record deals. We came close with a whole lot of them, but the terms of the deals always stank. And more importantly, there was this sort of thing where you could sense that they didn't know how to handle what we were doing. Right? So we just went around that by saying, okay, like for instance, like when we started playing live, the clubs wouldn't hire us because we didn't do any kind of cover tunes, right? So we would say, okay, then forget that, let's go over here and rent a hall and build up an audience, right? So the same thing happened with the record company in the sense that you start with the concept that you will market it yourself. And back then we were doing it with 45 singles. Those are the little ones, yeah. They're not a CD.
That you put on a record player. Remember record players? Needles and stuff?
So we found Peter McCulloch, who was a promoter in Vancouver, and we just got him to bankroll the first single. And I have to say, I mean, it was a magical time in the sense that that single went to a #1 in the top 5 or top 10 in Vancouver. Then 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, it was in Calgary. And it literally traveled across the country, and it was like in the top 10 over the course of about a year across the country, just based on the freedom that jocks had back then to say, oh, this is a great disc, I'm going to play this disc, right?
I remember that, working in radio at the time.
Nowadays it's the kind of thing where they get their list and, they're allowed to say this amount. It's much more like a corporate now than it was back then. There was the freedom to, for a jock to actually be part of breaking a band.
But even at that time, though, there was not a lot of independent bands, particularly in Canada.
Well, there were a few, that was all part of that sort of, new wave thing. We didn't fit into new wave, but there was a lot of do-it-yourself mentality happening back then, right? And, I just...
You never grew out of that do-it-yourself mentality,
no. Well, because, it's like, I always use the example, like, corporate rock is the kind of thing, like, that is like a six-lane highway cutting through pop culture, right? And whenever you have a 6-lane highway, there's always a service road at each side, right? And for us, it was like you see Platinum Blonde in a supersonic charged car driving down the 12-lane highway and then sputtering out after, maybe a year or so, right? And there's Doug and the Slugs in a 52 pickup truck, like the Beverly Hillbillies going down the service road like this, right? And I think you see that a lot in roots music, or, you know, any of that kind of stuff where they just go, hey, we're independent. The idea is to, you know, create music, get it out there, and, you know, only time tells if you succeed or fail. Right?
How, the audience, what's the audience that you draw? But demographic-wise.
Well, it's really funny because there are so many, like 18-year-old kids coming up with dog-eared copies of the original LPs, 12 inches, and holding them, they're like the dinosaur bones or something that they found in their parents' record collection. And they come up and they go, Mr. Bennett, could you sign this? And I kind of look around for my dad, right? That's the only Mr. Bennett I know, right? And it's really nice because there's a rediscovery thing happening in terms of, like, again, you know, the music that I listened to, you know, starting in the early 60s, were 78s that I used to rummage through Toronto, you know, junk stores to find them, right? So we actually qualify as a, what's the word, heritage act.
Yeah,
You know.
classic band.
Yeah, classic. And again, that's what a lot of people go back to. Like somebody growing up today, you may think the music currently sucks in terms of what, you know, we did or we're doing and everything, but there's always a market for that segment of the market for us that goes, I like your attitude, I like the fact they've always done it for themselves, and I like the independence of it.
Well, the thing that I always appreciated about the Slugs music was the doo-wop influence.
Yeah.
Because if people listen to it, there's a serious 40s, 50s doo-wop sound.
Which was, you know, it's like Quincy Jones, you know, fabulous producer. He was asked about, you know, what he felt about rap and hip hop and all that kind of stuff. And while he didn't want to dump on many of the artists, because, you know, they're primarily black artists, there was a telling line when he said, well, I miss melody, right? And a lot of hip hop, it's coming in your face, and it's got beat, and it's got bass, and it's got all this stuff, but it lacked melody, right? And this was about 3 years ago. And you really notice now in the last maybe 2 years that a lot of the biggest hits have been when they sampled, you know, really melodic songs.
And they're calling it R&B now.
Yeah, but they take a sample from like a 60s, 70s, 80s tune, and then they add their own stuff to it, which is creative and everything. And I won't argue with that, but still, it's the missing element. And melody, I think, you know, you don't walk down the street with the latest hip-hop record and go, you know, what you tend to do with songs is that you remember the melody, and that's the thing you're doing in the car when you look over and the person beside you is looking at you like you're crazy, right? Because you're blasting away singing the tune, right?
Well, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a really strong independent scene in Canada for all genres of music. When we were working together, we went into country music. A lot of people don't know that as a songwriter, you wrote country songs as well, and when you did the original Dealers project, you got turfed by every record company there was because, you know, old rock guy does country songs.
Yeah.
But then we turned around and gave those songs to other people.
Suzanne Gizzier.
And we had hits with those
Yeah.
songs. But it appears that even the independent nature of country music, where it was really big, is not even there anymore.
Well, you know, I guess it goes in waves and stuff, because I mean, the idea that you should be able to produce something that then you can send to the radio station has always been the dream. And I think the dream is always kept alive by the fact that people keep producing this stuff, right? And what happens is that as you produce more and more of these, you know, records, and you get some kind of success, all of a sudden the majors come in and go, okay, glom, 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 pick, 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 pick. And it's like you're watering down the gene pool, really. You know, it's like when they expanded the NHL. You can always argue, like, you know, hockey always suffered from that, just the fact that there was only so much talent available, right? And I just wish that the majors didn't have such a lock on radio. Because, you know, those days we worked together, I mean, the fact that you actually, as the promoter, you actually produced an amazing number of hits for country artists, right? But when we tried to take it over to mainstream radio, it just didn't apply, because the majors have such a lock on radio And it's like, I mean, the A&R guys now, the A&R guys used to go and see bands every night of the week. Now they go to the indie rack at the record store.
Check the CMJ charts.
Yeah, and they just see what's happening there, right? Which, hey, they should have been there at the beginning as opposed to kind of coming in the middle.
Tell us about the Norm show. I guess Doug and the Slugs is Norm's favorite band. We're not talking about Norm Peterson here.
You mean the Doug Bennett pension plan?
Yeah. I don't know. Is that what I mean?
Well, it was quite funny when Norm did a couple movies. I think we were doing some things in Vancouver, and his office kept calling because apparently he'd seen the band a few times in the '80s and really enjoyed, the wise-ass, really bad, rude, crude humor. I don't know where I get it from. Maybe it's from him. I don't know. But he came out, and he never came out, but he just kept trying to come out and see us. And then, well, okay, great. Last I'll hear from him, but it's nice to get a call from Hollywood. And then 3 months later, they said they wanted to use a song. Right? So.
And
I said no, of course, because I
holding out for more money.
Well, no, it's like artistic integrity,
Which has always been high on your list.
Yeah. No, I just said, hey, if you want to use it, just give me the money!
Yeah.
Give me the money!
Well, there have been a lot of artists that have generated press, good or bad. I guess any press is good press throughout history. I mean, Jim Morrison flashed. Any number of the Stones got arrested somewhere. We have a gentleman here that has also been arrested for his stage act. Now, this was always something that was really kind of a fluke and I guess
really embarrassing.
Well, no, but it's a great story, Doug.
Well, basically what happened is that I could deal with being arrested for beating somebody up. I could deal with being arrested for doing drugs or stuff, but to be arrested and publicized in the Toronto Sun as being in a hair-pulling incident. That was a little bit.
A hissy fit. A cat fight, yeah.
Well, we're doing the Diamond Club in Toronto, and Norm coming, the show. I mean, you just I come down and make the audience participate, have fun with them, and 99% of the time it works. I mean, I do it for biker bars that we play, I do it for bar mitzvahs that we play. You sit on people's laps and you just mess with their heads, and it's all taken in good humor, right? But I did it in Toronto at the Diamond Club, and thought everything was fine, jumped out, sat on a bunch of people's laps, messed with their hair, and because that was the '80s where everybody's
big hair
was like that. Right? So,
your fingers got caught in it.
Yeah. And so anyways, 3 months later, we're coming through at the end of the tour, and the police phone me and say, could you come down to the station? We could come to your hotel and arrest you, but since it's a hair-pulling incident, we'd rather you just turn yourself in. So I'm sitting there in a cop shop, and on a long bench, and there's hookers over here, and there's quasi-looking drug dealers over here, and they're all talking about how they're innocent, and their beefs and all that stuff. And finally, one of the hookers turns to me, what are you in here for? And I said, I murdered somebody.
Unless you want to say you were in a nasty hair-pulling incident.
So we finally, it cost me like $7 grand to, fly to Toronto, do all this kind of stuff, and finally her lawyer said, just as we were walking into the, court, that she's willing to settle for some money, right? So I mean, we had already spent our money by then. We said, fuck it, just, hey, what can the guy do? So we went in there, and technically I was convicted of assault because I sat on somebody's lap. Because if you get into anybody's space and touch them, but legally that's assault. So, I got what they call a conditional discharge, meaning that you're guilty but you're innocent. It's guilty, but it's such a waste of time to do this that this will never show up on any record whatsoever.
So, in retrospect, would you have preferred to have actually flashed somebody?
No, no, I wish I had sex with her so that she could realize like just how bad I really am.
But she would have preferred you to pull her hair.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to just...
No, yeah, I mean, you never know with that stuff, you know, because, you know, basically, you know, people either get what we do or they don't get it, and, you know, you can't really tell what works or what doesn't work. You just know when you go through the situation. If you come out the other side, most people are laughing and having a good time, it works. But if they're kind of all growling at you, then you turn to the band and say, I need another song.
Yeah.
Shame.
But I mean, it obviously works. You've been doing it for 20 years.
Oh yeah, no, for the most part, I mean, I really think it does work in the sense that, you know, you lose fans, then you gain new ones, which, you know, a lot of bands don't do. I mean, we'll have our bad nights and stuff like that, but for the most part, the tours work because you see younger and younger people in it.
Mm-hmm. Something that I discovered with working with you for a few years that a lot of people don't realize about a lot of musicians is that you're actually a serious political animal in terms of, you know, what's going on in the country, and you're very astute about...
Yeah, some musicians are like political junkies and some are like sports junkies. I mean, you have your particular thing that you enjoy reading, you know, and as I saw the sports figures getting younger and younger and richer, I thought I'd turn to looking at guys like older and older.
Are you ever going to run for office?
Oh, if I could get rid of all my, if I could kill all the people I've done coke with.
Do we say that?
Well, you know, it was the 80s. Everybody was doing everything, you know. You know, like George Bush in the States, I mean, he was an oil guy, a rich man's son. It was the 80s. He was partying like crazy, stuffing everything he could. I mean, that's just what everybody did. But if he had just come out and said, yes, I did all those drugs, but, you know, he got religion, you know, 10 years ago. That's enough of a time frame to say, I found God. It's not like I'm finding God in the middle of the campaign. I found God 10 years ago, and I've changed my life. I say, you know, it would be tough to find somebody who did an experiment or try something, you know, who was like 45, 50. It would be tough to find people in that age group who hadn't tried some of that stuff. So, you know, why not lighten up a bit and say, hey, I did it. You know, I went through it, I survived it. Now I'm a better person for it. Because
And I'm running for office!
Yeah, it's not like you're voting for some crackhead. I mean, you know, if somebody in the microphone doing this, that ain't gonna vote for him.
Well, it's also too, you know, if you're doing snortable drugs, it's awful hard to say that I didn't inhale.
Yes.
As Clinton did, you know.
Well, that was, again, I mean, it's kind of quasi-lame, but again, maybe it's kind of demographically they have the overlap. We've still got a lot of people from around, I guess, well, now, when Clinton was running, they would have been, you know, the seniors of that time period, you know, 10 years ago, they wouldn't have touched any of that stuff, right? So he had to deal with that overlap. I mean, we're talking now 10 years later, so most people in their 60s, I would say, had tried something. I mean, my father, in the 60s, which is an average working class guy, he had smoked dope, right? He did continue smoking it, but it was just, you know, the jazz players and the musicians, all the musicians from that kind of time period would go out behind and, you know, have a puff or whatever, and he would be part of that. But back then, it was so, the law was so brutal that you couldn't admit that to anybody, right?
I'm going to do a smooth segue here. Any albums in the works?
Yeah, I'm writing one now. I think I got about 10 good songs I can use.
Is it a Slugs album or is it Doug Bennett
That's
album?
going to be a marketing choice, right? You know, because we tried to market the last Doug and the Slugs, and radio, they may not react to it very well, so it may be a Doug Bennett thing that when we go on tour, we do, you know, Doug and the Slugs and stuff.
Any change in the music? As we used to talk about your, you know,
Yeah, well,
Leonard
actually,
Cohen type.
Well, yeah, it's basically, well, hey, I'll give you the first tape, and then when you air this a year from now, you...
Well, this is actually airing on Tuesday. So.
Oh, no!
We're done? Good enough there.
Yeah, you can end on that screen, go closer to my mouth. Always doing the brick wall. Go to the birds. The birds. Go to the...
How much do we have?
A lot.
21
20,
minutes.
21? Oh, that's great. So we've got that put in
Okay.
video.
23, 22. 29, 23, 22. Oh,
Anything else you want to
Depende
add?
ng ilang
No.
Depende ng ilang